I'm talking to Dr. Dennis Domer, Emeritus Professor in American Studies and an Emeritus Associate Dean in Architecture. Right now, he's researching and writing about the red light district in the East Bottoms of Lawrence, Kansas. So we've got a couple questions for Dennis on this fascinating topic. Dennis, if you could just start by talking a little bit about why you got interested in this area. What attracted you to it? What do you think is important about it?
Well, it's attracts me because it fits my interests, which is to do what others haven't done yet, maybe even avoided, maybe just whispered about. And the East Bottoms, there are any number of historians who in Lawrence who don't know any more about it than it was called East Bottoms. But when it comes up, they kind of wink or cackle a little bit, the East Bottoms. And I decided that it was time to get to the bottom of the East Bottoms because there was a lot more to it than a wink of an eye or a chuckle or a grin. And indeed, there is. And I just love researching areas that people have decided not to do. And something this interesting, it has been there or was there for 120 years. I mean, it didn't operate that long, but we could have talked about this long ago. So I'm lucky that my colleagues don't like to get close to sin or dirt. Because, for example, I have finished a long article on the above ground sewer system that Lawrence had from 1854 to 1891 with the first underground sewer, but that was just along Massachusetts Street. So nobody wanted to tell that shitty story, so I did.
I love that. Well, Dennis, of what you've uncovered so far, and I think maybe that's a good verb to use. Um, what's the most interesting thing you've found so far? Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, there was a rather dense placement of speakeasies from 7th in New Jersey to 9th in New Jersey and 8th in Pennsylvania to 9th in New Jersey. And in fact, there were about a dozen of them. And there was one woman, her name was Aunt Jane Williams. She was an old slave who came to Lawrence right after the Civil War, I believe. She was married to someone also in the business. I call it the business, which is liquor, prostitution, gambling, and for Aunt Jane, it was serving really good food.
Oh.
And to find someone like Aunt Jane whose word was law there, everybody depended upon Aunt Jane for the business because she could get the goods delivered into Lawrence. And she had a delivery, kind of a wholesale delivery area about 1 block from where her speakeasy was at 817 Pennsylvania. And her ex-husband ran the warehouse on, I believe it was 832 New Jersey. And all the goods were in the basement, but Aunt Jane had the key. Aunt Jane ran a joint there at 817 Pennsylvania for nearly 40 years and was often arrested but seldom jailed because she always paid her fines because she had plenty of money. She made a lot of money. And many of the other jointists around were quite dependent upon her. What she did was during the day, she ran a boarding house that is not room but board, food, because she was a great cook and she employed people day and night. And that boarding house turned into a joint at night. And she was like a mother to young men and some women too, particularly out of KU, were away from home and were eating really bad food in some boarding house up near KU. And if they could come down to Aunt Jane's, she would give them an incredible amount of food. The living room had a big keg of beer there. She had a dance hall and a piano player, and she had the girls that could go upstairs. And if she had too many, she had all of her connections to the other speakeasies. You guys go here, wherever. So to find somebody that sophisticated in an illegal business who could operate illegally in really cahoots with the judicial system and the police system because they needed the money to operate. Remember that Lawrence invested in big railroad bonds and lost all of that money. And in the 80s and 90s and into the turn of the century, there just wasn't very much money to do all the infrastructure work that needed to be done. The sewer is one thing, streets and curbs another thing, water is another thing. So all of those things had to be built. We have no idea how much building was going on besides the dam was built, which is a big, great story about that in A.J. Griffin. But here is this woman who was like any other successful business person in the history of Lawrence. She knew her clientele. She knew how to run the business. She had an organization. She could deliver, and she could pay off her fines. So they would haul her down to the police station about once a month to pay off her fine so they could pay the salaries and do the work. And she'd turn right around and go back to work. In fact, her joints never stopped operating, even though she might have been in jail overnight, because they all knew how this worked. That was the game. And the East Bottoms really came to its fruition between 1890 and about 1915. And she was there all along, but she was there from the beginning of Prohibition, I believe, about 1881.
Wow.
And they ran her out of town for the last time in 1918. But she was a superstar. She was on the front pages of the Lawrence papers, I don't know how many times, maybe more than most mayors. She was a very popular woman. She was a great personality, obviously. Almost all of these entrepreneurs were African American. Not completely, but almost all of them. But their clientele was both black and white people out of KU and out of the city. So there was kind of an early desegregation around this business of liquor, which was the great lubricator, and sex, which was its own lubricator, and gambling, craps in particular. That was a little bit less. And there was a hierarchy, too, of different kinds of joints and dives and clubs. And, of course, there were lots of people who used it from West Lawrence, but they didn't have to because you could buy liquor from the druggist. If you had the money, the Kansas Prohibition law said you can't use alcohol except for, and one of them was for medicinal reasons. Well, there was a lot better liquor probably and a lot cheaper, and it was also more fun to go to the East Bottoms than to go to your local druggist in the alleyway into your drugstore and getting your bottle in a sack and going home with it. So that's what surprised me, was the sophistication of the business model.
And you're going to be writing about this for the Embattled Lawrence series, I think. Eh?
Yes, I am. It's in the volume 2. It's called The Enduring Struggle for Freedom. The reason it belongs there is because why was it mostly African American? Well, there was systemic racism from the very beginning. Even though you would think in Lawrence, an abolitionist town, it would be open and free to the blacks to achieve according to their abilities and interests. No way. There was in 1865 they chased the blacks to southeast Lawrence and surrounded them and said, "Give us your guns," which they did not do. And they said, "If you come back, we're going to use them." So they didn't come back. But all I'm saying is that there was prejudice from the very beginning. And so if you're a uneducated black man out of Tennessee or out of Alabama, what kind of work are you going to get? Day laborer, which is about $1.25 an hour. Well, you're not going to have any money at the end of the year if you're not destitute already. You're just not going to have it. So there was no money there. There were many obstacles put in your way to achieve a kind of career that you could have some money, although there wasn't very much money for anybody. But if you got into the illegal liquor business, you could make a lot of money. And Aunt Jane said, 1881, her husband had a drayman's license from 1866 on. And a drayman meant that you could haul big kegs of liquor and beer around to the various places. Well, in 1881, he obviously lost his job. That's why I think that's when she went into the business, because they were already into the business.
What a great story. I don't want to have you give all the secrets away because
There's a lot more.
folks can read that in Embattled Lawrence Volume 2 that's coming up. Dr. Domer, thank you so much. Fascinating.
You're welcome.
I look forward to more conversations like this.
Me too.